Welcome to our Weber County Commission meeting. This the 11th day of December 2018. It's 10 o'clock. We have present today to my immediate right, Commissioner Scott Jenkins, to my left, Commissioner James Ebert, and I'm Commissioner Jim Harvey. We're glad you're here. We'll follow the agenda today with a couple of items that we'll talk about right now. For those who have come for our public hearing, or the ZDA item, that has been held. I don't have any reason for that, but was just notified about 20 minutes ago that they're going to try to get that on next week. So item H on the agenda, or the back page, has been held for another week. Our invocation this morning will be given by our Division Director from Roads, Mr. Joe Hadley. Following Mr. Hadley, Scott Park, our Comptroller, will give the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'll give the thought of the day. We'll go to that point. Mr. Hadley?
Our kind, dear Heavenly Father, Father, we are very thankful for the building at which we have to meet in today. And Father, we ask a special blessing upon our brave men and women of our armed services. Please watch over them and protect them. Please give them a sense of comfort during this holiday season while they're away from their families. Father, we ask that when the time comes, we can return home safely to our families. We are truly thankful for the true meaning of the holiday season. Father, we are truly blessed to live in this great country, state, and beautiful county in which we live in. We say these things humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. About around 5 years ago, as I was presenting contracts for the Weber County Fairgrounds or Golden Spike Event Center, usually seated on the back row, there was a new person in town that I didn't recognize. He was a sworn officer with the Riverdale Police Department. He introduced himself as James Ebert. He later ran for Weber County Commission and won that seat. I didn't know James. I'd met him here in this room. Our interactions weren't quite that frequent back then, as he was not our liaison commissioner. In the commission, we have different portfolios, and so not all of us would handle human services or handle culture, parks and recreation, or handle relations with the treasury or the sheriff, or all the variety of different things that happen on the commission. They're divided up so that each of us carry a balanced load of responsibility. Fortunately, and I'll just tell you, after being elected as commissioner, not only was the job fun, but it was very challenging. And I didn't know what I was going to get with especially Commissioner Ebert. But in my life, I've been fortunate to have a few friends. Some of them have been incredible examples to me. Many of them are older. Many of them have had a lot more experience, and I love what experience does to a man's life. It's like a library. And when unfortunately things happen as age takes its toll on all of us, in my ignorance, I would think, you know, they don't build men like that anymore. How am I going to replace in my pool of friends a man with character or honor or dignity or integrity like that? Didn't think it was possible. A few things come to mind today. You know, sometimes it's much more difficult to make the right decision than to choose the easier wrong. After 24 months, I can attest that this commissioner to my left, James Ebert, makes decisions based on information we have from qualified staff. We support our staff. James says in the public eye something, but then when it's behind closed doors, he says the very same thing. Thomas Jefferson says that more politicians are criticized for doing something than those who sit back and do nothing at all. Many of the great things that we are enjoying in this wave of positiveness now in Weber County, for me, I can attest to Charles Jameson Ebert. There is a thought that I heard recently. It was a thought given by Prime Minister Brian McMulroy from Canada during President George H.W. Bush's farewell. And I'll close my thoughts this morning with. There are wooden ships. There are sailing ships. There are ships that sail the sea. But the best ships are friendships, and may they always be. If you would, and I realize it may be a little inappropriate, but if you'd join me in giving a round of applause to Commissioner Ebert. There'll be a time for him to have a couple of words to say. Now's not that time. No, don't grab your mic. It's not your turn.
I just want to thank Commissioner Harvey for the eulogy. For those of you texting my wife with the condolences, let her know I have not passed away. I will be home tonight.
I've asked him to give a couple of words at the end of this commission meeting today. We'll now, Commissioners, move to item number E, like echo on our agenda, which are public comments. If there are things, including in the consent or action items, that you'd like to visit with or have discussion with the commission about, we invite you to come to the podium and state your name, the city in which you live, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. You can do that now. None being recognized, Commissioners, we'll move to the consent items on our agenda today. Our consent items are as follows. Item 1 is a request for approval of warrants 1628 and 1629 and 434,605 to 434,825 in the amount of $1,847,000, $47,241.64. Item 2 is a request for approval of purchase orders in the amount of $114,112.54. Item 3 is a request for approval of the minutes for the meeting held on November 27, 2018. Item 4 is a request from the Weber Morgan Health Department for approval to surplus an Edger PowerMate. Item 5 is a request from Human Resources for approval of policy 5-200 for pay increases. Item 6 is a request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and the Utah Youth Rodeo Association for Rough Stock Safety School, adding to an additional event or a date at the Golden Spike Event Center. And that one, Commissioners, item number 6, is just in addition to an existing contract that's there, but that just helps enhance additional youth activities. Commissioners, questions on any of those consent items? None being heard. Ricky, would you go over some of the detail, please?
Absolutely. This week we issued 13 purchase orders for $114,000. 61% of that amount, or $70,000, was for our IT department, and that will go towards purchasing PC hardware and software. 13% of that amount, or $15,000, is for our ice sheet, and that is to repair a compressor. 11%, or $13,000, is for property management, and that is going towards the boiler room floor repair and replacement. We issued 223 checks this week for $1.8 million. 27% of that amount, or $495,000, was a construction payment on our main library. 19%, or $351,000, is on behalf of the sheriff, and that was to purchase radios and tasers. And then 13%, or $243,000, was for the jail portion of that, radios, as well as $65,000 in culinary, and then office chairs and some maintenance. And then lastly, 11%, or $201,000, is for property management, and that is to replace the chiller here in the Weber Center.
Very good. Commissioners, does any of that detail bring up any other thoughts or questions? If so, I'll entertain a motion, or if not,
I'd like a minute here.
go ahead.
So, Ricky, I didn't recognize Ennis Flint. And I'm sorry, I forgot to call you on this yesterday, or not even you. It was 2%, $29,541. Do you happen to know
What's the vendor name?
Ennis Flint?
I'll pull that up in
Or is it
just a
supposed to be
second.
Dennis Flint and they forgot the D? I don't know, it's on page 4.
Oh,
Joe. Okay, very good.
that's for paint.
So, thank you, Mr. Hadley. Traffic road plate.
I appreciate that.
Is it Ennis? Ennis. No any relation to Dennis? I just wondered if both had to have the S as their last, I guess.
On our purchase orders, Godfrey, how do we get to those?
Be quick on the lever over there.
I'll just say it, I can't do it there. When I got into those, I questioned $8,000 worth of flashlights and $5,000 worth of gloves and the boiler room floor. But in talking with the guys that are doing it, they've convinced me that it's actually important we do that today. They said last year we had water leaking through the roof into your office, Mr. Park, or in that area. Maybe it was Ricky's.
It was Roger Brunkers,
Oh, was it Rogers?
also known as the waterfall room.
Oh, there you go. So I'm convinced that that's important. And then I know the sheriff, they go through lots of gloves out there all the time. So anyway, I'm convinced that that's correct. So I'd make a motion that we approve the consent items.
Have a motion and a second. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those consent items pass as presented and read. Thank you. We'll move now to item G on our agenda. Our first one, Mr. Joe Olson. It's a discussion and/or action on the Weber County Tax Review Committee recommendation regarding the 2017 taxable status for parcel 22-171-0002. Mr. Olson.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. Excuse me.
As it says.
Hold on just a second, Mr. Olson. Is it a good morning?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here representing the Tax Review Committee. We were approached by a property owner, Mr. Karcheski, on a property that he owns in the Upper Valley. Mr. Karcheski built his home in 2016, became his residence for 2017. Mr. Karczewski identified through the valuation notice in the tax bill process in 2018 that property was not receiving the primary residential exemption. He appealed the 2018 taxable status through the Weber County Board of Equalization. Once we received the appeal through the timely filing, we reviewed the information, and the property is in fact Mr. Karczewski's primary residence. We granted that exemption for 2018. Mr. Karczewski made a request through the Tax Review Committee to address 2017 and see if that primary residential exemption could be applied to 2017. Mr. Karczewski attended the Tax Review Committee meeting. He's been very helpful in our discussions. And through the process, we've made the determination, or the Commission has made the determination, that taxable status is a issue that must be addressed through the Board of Equalization in any given year. We value as of January 1st. The taxable status was not appealed timely through the 2017 Board of Equalization process. In your packet, we included a couple deeds that identified the mailing address for the notices. It was a Kansas City, Missouri address. When our appraisers thoroughly worked to identify taxable status, the appraiser could not identify that it was in fact a primary residence, referred to the mailing address, which was Kansas City, defaulted to the secondary status, which means they would not receive that residential exemption. Again, this body has denied many requests for the primary residential exemption because the determination has been made it's a Board of Equalization issue, and it doesn't deal with anything with tax review. The 2017 valuation notice and the 2017 tax bill is included in your packet. The valuation notice clearly identifies if property is primary or non-primary. In this situation, it identified non-primary on the valuation notice, and it defines it on the notices as tax at 100% of market value. Property does not receive primary residence exemption. And furthermore, when the tax bill goes out, it identifies that the property is the acronym NP, and NP is defined on the tax bill as non-primary property, tax at 100% of market value. Property receives no residential exemption since it's not your primary residence. We had a situation in Weber County where the request for the primary residential exemption was denied by the Commission, and that owner actually took that decision into Second District Court. Second District Court identified that the assessor has the obligation to identify if it's primary or non-primary, and the decision that we made based on the best information is supportable. The Second District Court found in our favor. That was taken to the Utah Supreme Court, and the Utah Supreme Court agreed with the Second District Court's decision. So my recommendation to the Commission from the Tax Review Committee is to deny the request to change the 2017 taxable status based on that information that I provided. Mr. Karczewski is here. He's made a request to have a few moments of your time so we could discuss the issue.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I believe everything was said already, and I didn't know that I'm running against the Utah Supreme Court. That puts me in very disadvantaged position. The story is I moved 2 years ago. I somehow didn't understand the NP or didn't pay attention. And my mistake, I paid the taxes. So I'm asking to have a reimbursement for the overpaid taxes. And I spent 30-something years in business, and I saw invoices going back and forth, and if there was overpayment, it was always reimbursed. So, good ethic, business ethic, will say I should get the reimbursement. And that's it.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Yeah. We have a question from Commissioner Ebert.
Yes,
Do you go by Christopher or Chris?
you can go, Chris.
Chris. So Chris, I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying that 2 years ago you moved into the residence?
Yes.
And that you lived there 100% of the year? Not a 50-50, not a 60-40? This is your primary residence for the last 2
I
years?
sold my house 2 years ago in Kansas City.
In Kansas City?
Yes.
Do you have any other residence? Do you own any
No.
other property outside the state of Utah or
No.
in the state of Utah? Okay, and how would you prove that you have like utility bills or something?
Yes,
that
I
prove
have
that
everything. In fact, I sent everything for this year taxes correction.
Okay.
So all of the documents going back to 2016, yes.
216.
Mhm.
Are you retired, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And how many people live within the household with you? Two?
Mhm.
Is that just you and another, or you and two others? I'm sorry.
No, to me and my wife.
You and your wife, okay. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Commissioner, any questions? Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Karzyski, is that correct? Thank you. Is that close?
Very close, yes.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, we all know how to pronounce Christopher, that's easy, why don't you? Never mind. Commissioners' discussion.
This gets hard to know what to do here because the law really doesn't allow us. Joe, can you answer that? We don't have a legal basis to do this, do we?
That's been the determination of the tax review committee, and we've had input from council. It becomes in our opinion, a timely filing where taxable status is involved specific to a Board of Equalization issue. The statutory deadline is September 15th, or 45 days after the notice is mailed. In this situation, the decision has been made that the application could be accepted even to the following March 31st. So in other words, if this same issue happened for the 2018 tax year and there was a property owner that appealed to Ricky's office today, based on the precedent that's been set, that application would be accepted once we did our discovery and analysis. If it did in fact qualify for that residential exemption, we could apply that residential exemption for 2018. Unfortunately, in this situation for 17, there wasn't a timely filing prior to that September 15th or into March 31st of 2018. To follow up on Chris's comment, it's very clear we have, I believe in the situation, we have copies of driver's license. It's very clear it's a primary residence. It's just that the opinion that the Board of Equalization has and the tax review committee, as far as making recommendation, we do not have legal status to get to 2017 because it wasn't filed timely. And again, the commission has agreed with that. We have precedents to set on several situations, and the courts have also held in that favor also.
You know, for me, this becomes it becomes not so much about the money, but a moral issue. I would agree that in private business, you do the right thing, and you do the right thing. But when it's kind of like, because of the law, we're painted into a corner. We do the right thing, we break the law.
Well, in fact, I had the discussion earlier, can't we split it with them? Well, the point is you really can't because of the law. I'm empathetic here. I would like to help Chris. He just made a mistake, and gee, we all make mistakes in our life every day.
Every day.
But then, Mrs. House, we had a conversation with her yesterday about other issues where some other people pay taxes going back 10 and 12 years on property that were mismeasured. And there are mistakes that were made, but you have hard deadlines here by law where you can go so that you keep things clear and clean and procedural. And it gets really complicated. Your attorney's right there. Talk to him about it.
Cortland is part of the tax review committee process, and he gives us legal advice if there's any legal questions you have.
Yeah, if there's any specific questions, I would defer to Cortland, other than to add that the law, although the result appears harsh, it's designed specifically to ensure finality in issues that they don't go on for forever.
Cortland, would you mind just coming and making a brief comment, so that we,
To salve your conscience?
probably, I don't, for those that might be listening now or listening in the future, we have tremendous trust and regard for those who represent us civilly. You being here, Cortland, you here, Chris, and also your team, we have great trust in you. So, Cortland, let me just add that to your shoulders.
Before I start sounding like the cruel, heartless attorney, is that what?
I don't know what you're going to say.
Yes, Merry Christmas. The Tax Review Committee makes recommendations typically based on what the law says. And in this case, as Mr. Olson has stated, there is a process set up by the legislature for people to appeal by a certain deadline any issue with the valuation of their property. And in this particular case, there were notices sent out that listed the non-primary or primary status, as the case may be. In this particular case, it said non-primary. And every property owner in the county would get a similar notice and have the opportunity to dispute that. I would presume that there were those who did see that and brought it to the attention of the county and received the corrective action that they deserved in a timely way. And so justice was possible. I understand we all make mistakes, and that, what to do about that is not my decision, it's yours. But the law is fair in the sense that Mr. Christopher had the same opportunity that every other taxpayer did to review that notice and appeal by the correct time that the legislature has established for bringing any mistakes to the attention of the county officials. And when that passes, one way to look at it is it fair to give one person a pass and not apply the deadlines that the law imposes? If we do that, what meaning does the deadline have? Do we have to let anybody 5 years from now come back? Are we able to say, well, if you apply by the following year, it's okay, but 2 years from now, it's not okay? Once you pass that deadline, where is the line that you draw? And do you have authority to draw a line besides what the legislature has drawn? There is value in sticking with what the legislature has said as a hard and fast rule. And so I believe legally the Tax Review Committee's position and decision and recommendation to you is the correct one and does have an element of fairness in it, even though we know, I don't think it's disputed that the assessment that was made or the value that was assessed was improper.
Great. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Erickson?
Mr. Erickson, does the law make any provision to waive or go around or be lenient or have mercy? This comes to a mercy and justice point of view here.
Yes, there is a provision. I'm going to pull it up because I think the language is important. In section 59-2-1347 of the Utah Code, it says, if any interested person applies to the county legislative body for an adjustment or deferral of taxes levied against property assessed by the county assessor, a sum less than the full amount due may be accepted or the full amount may be deferred, where in the judgment of the county legislative body, the best human interests and the interests of the state and the county are served. So there is a provision there that does allow, in individual circumstances, an adjustment if the best human interests and the interests of the state and the county are served, and that is a decision for you to make.
So what part of the code is that in?
It's
I
in
mean, would that go also to these mismeasurements that we were talking about, where they've assessed a tax for 20 years and we find out later on it's been mismeasured?
It could, yes. This particular section doesn't specifically list any kind of time restriction. The position the county has taken previously is that we go back 4 years because that is the statute of limitations that would apply if we were to defend against a challenge that were brought against us. And so we have, as a tax review committee, and I've seen the county commission follow that recommendation, only gone back 4 years because of that statute of limitations.
We have the most lenient position on that of any county in the state, I understand.
I've been told that that is the case. I haven't personally surveyed all the other counties, but I understand that many of them do not go back that far.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ebert.
This would be for Ricky.
Thanks, Cortland.
Thank you, Cortland. Ricky, I know we had some of these same issues in 2015-16. There was a concern that the tax notice didn't clearly articulate what NP stood for, and that we took some measures at that time to better inform on that tax notice what the, non-primary really meant, because a lot of people weren't aware of it. Do you remember that conversation, and what steps did we take?
Yeah, I do remember it. We looked at that, and we actually consulted with a design expert out of New Jersey regarding proper principles to consider when you're issuing a complex official document like this. One of the changes, we made several changes. One of the changes we did was, instead of putting NP, we actually spelled it out. It used to be NP, and then down you had a legend down below, and now we just spell it out across the top rather than having some kind of acronym that people have to find elsewhere on the page. So we did that, as well as a few other things to try and clarify the content.
And then farther down, it has a definition of primary residence and non-primary residence, and what green property was, to better explain that. And
that's correct. We did want to clarify that for non-primary residences, that home would be taxable at the full value, full taxable value.
Did you see that? Yeah.
so I just wanted to kind of bring that up, that this has been an issue we've had for a long period of time. These tax notices, even though we've taken, in my opinion, extraordinary measures to better explain what each of the classifications, it's still a complicated document at times that most people don't want to spend time reading. That being said, we go back on a 4-year payback if the county had made a mistake, because litigation, when we have to have a delineator of finality, so to speak. But I guess what my question, commissioners, is, we've had this discussion several times with many of these requests. Is it time for us to create a policy or ordinance that clearly delineates this for us, so we don't have to have this constant discussion? Because it does weigh heavy on us as we look at citizens that have paid either because of a measuring mistake on the counties or of an individual's mistake on reading their tax notification. And I guess my thought is that this may not be the best time to rule on this. Maybe we need to talk to legal and to talk to Ricky's office and make an actual ordinance and policy that kind of delineates what this is. A 4-year look back if the county has made a mistake, and we can really evaluate that, and maybe a 1-year look back if the individual's made a mistake. But I I think right now, if we were to, other than if we just deny it, but I wonder if it's time for us to really sit down and look at this and see if we can create a box around this that makes it much easier for us.
Well, I would argue we have. Those limits that you talk about are there today. And that's why we're having this discussion.
Each petitioner has the right to be heard before this body on that.
Again, I don't disagree, but it becomes, it is a struggle when we can, if we choose to, but we don't because we don't want to create a myriad of other issues. So, those are just my thoughts.
Commission? One thing, just looking forward to tax review based on whatever decision you make. This is a taxable status issue. The Board of Equalization primarily deals with valuation. It deals with all the factual error in the situations we have incorrect square footage, that type of thing. One thing to keep in mind, and there's been many rulings on this, we value as of January 1st, and just to throw some arbitrary numbers out, if we have a valuation on a home of $300,000, and let's say a property owner on December 31st buys it for $280,000, and the $280,000 is a good number. They do not file timely by that September 15th deadline, and there aren't any other errors with notification, that type of thing. That appeal is not accepted for that year. Now, that's on the valuation side. The taxable status and the reason that that extension is granted through the Board of Equalization to that following March 31st is it's been identified. We've defined it as a factual error, much like if we have the incorrect square footage. So as you have this discussion, you may open up some situations that the valuation side comes in specific to timely filing that we may be dealing with as a consequence of whatever your decision is.
Wow. Yeah, so your point, Joe, is by messing around with this, we could make it much worse.
Well, I would just make sure you keep everything in mind if you are going to change what the statute that we go back 4 years, as Cortland says, it's very lenient. You talk to other counties and they just kind of laugh at you. It's a Board of Equalization issue, and the Board of Equalization opens up discussion of valuation typically back to January 1st. That's what the board is for. It's a check and balance. I don't know what Ricky's office could do further to notify the property owner of the taxable status of the property and define what the remedy of fixing that situation, what you have to do. So I guess it's just the caution that if you start changing how you define, how you accept applications based on taxable status, make sure you keep that valuation part of the process in mind. And again, there's been many state tax commission decisions on timely filing that you can reference. We just feel as tax review, based on the guidance we've been given since there wasn't an application prior to that March 31st deadline in 2018, we do not have legal status to go back.
Thank you.
I don't know what else we can do on that tax notification to make it, more clear or better define what the issues are. I think you've done a good job, Ricky.
Yes. So, Commissioners, any more discussion on this item? None being heard, I'll entertain a motion. No motion? If there's no motion, then there's no action to take. I'll make it. We need to give staff a clear direction. Based on what we've learned, I'll make a motion that we, Chair will make, I don't know that I'll get a second, but I'll make a motion that we accept the Tax Review Committee's recommendation.
What is the recommendation?
That we deny.
Oh, that we deny it, yeah. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 2 is a request for approval of a resolution by and between Weber County Commissioners and with the County Commissioners of Weber County appointing trustees to the Roy Water Conservancy District. Stacy Skane.
Good morning. I received notice to post for the Roy Water Conservancy District. There's 5 districts within the Conservancy District. Gary Newman and Tommy Smith, both of their appointments expire at the end of the year. And Gary Newman represents District 1, Tommy Smith represents District 2. And I post according to state statute and received their 2 applications with no others.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions on this? I just have a statement. I believe some of the members do you represent the, I've kind of seen a little bit of it. I want to.
It looked like quadruplets out there.
I want you to know that this body appreciates your service. We appreciate you coming and spending time away from family to do what you do in that district. And in all districts, in all bodies, in all boards that we have here. There's a lot that serve without pay and do make hard decisions. This body's a little different. I can tell you, moving forward, some of you have served for a long, long time. Most boards that we have associated with the county where this body approves, there are terms, as there are in yours, but they don't exceed more than 2 terms, or there's limitations. And so for some of our boards, like some of our staff, some of them, I want to make sure, for me, it's important to perpetuate what many have worked hard to create. And so I'm concerned that we create some type of excitement or energy surrounding teaching younger folks, one, to be involved, but the other one is to serve. So as we move forward, I hope that that can be the case and that we are actively looking for people. I'll say it like this. It's my opinion that the best leaders surround themselves with people who can take their place. I'll leave it at that. With that, Commissioners, if there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion for item number 2.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Tommy J. Smith and Gary L. Newman to the Roy Water Conservancy District as trustees in each of their individual districts.
We have a motion.
And it is Resolution 59.
We have a motion
And a second.
and a second.
Hold on, and to that second.
Okay.
You know, I've known Tommy years and years and years. I mean, when I was on the city, as mayor of Plain City, we had occasion to go to Roy, and he served on city council for how long?
9 years.
9 years, long time over there. So this is a little bit of his service, not a lot. He's one of those diehards in the community, and I kind of want to thank him for his service. You've done a great job, Tommy, over the years. You bet. Anyway, second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. Fatima?
Commissioner Ebert?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
And Chair Harvey?
Aye. Thank you. Item number 3 is a request for approval of the resolution of the County Commissioners of Weber County reappointing Gary Boyer to the Weber County Tax Review Committee. Ms. Hallisey?
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Ebert, for your service to Weber County. Gary Boyer is currently serving on the Tax Review Committee, and his term actually expired in June, and we just realized that, so we are asking to reappoint him through June of 2020.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions about Mr. Boyer? This was an appointment made long before I got here, but I'm familiar with Mr. Boyer. Really smart, and he's been in the housing financial market for decades. If Gary's ever listening, probably 5, 6 decades, 7 decades. I said that on purpose, but I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution
60.
60, appointing Gary Boyer to the Weber County Tax Review Committee, or reappointing, excuse me.
Second.
Motion and a second. Fatima?
Commissioner Ebert?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
Chair Harvey?
Aye. Thank you. That resolution carries 60. Thank you. Item 4, Commissioners, there is request for approval of a resolution of the County Commissioners of Weber County appointing members to the Utah Association of Counties Board. In the past, just by way of explanation, Weber County has 2 seats on that board with the Utah Associations of County, or UAC. Because last year Commissioner Ebert was elected as secretary, we willingly gave up one of our seats to Box Elder County. Again, that borderless one-win, all-win type of philosophy. Commissioner Ebert, his assignment was complete in November at the annual meeting. So now we have 2 positions, and ironically, one of the members of Box Elder County is now serving as the 2nd vice president, so they have their representation. We'll have our 2 representatives still with the Utah Association of Counties. So our recommendation, based on the 2 seats that we have with UAC, is to appoint Commissioner Scott Jenkins and Commissioner Jim Harvey to that board. Any questions?
Was that a motion?
I'll make that as a motion.
I will second that motion. Resolution 70?
61.
61, that was close. Sorry. What I was thinking.
I don't either. So we have a motion and a second for resolution number 61 that's close to 70.
Yes.
Go ahead, Fatima.
Commissioner Ebert,
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins,
Aye.
Chair Harvey.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Our item number 5 will be heard by Ricky Hatch. It's a request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Christensen, Palmer, and Ambrose for auditing services for the county. Mr. Hatch?
Interesting that Christer, if you take the first 3 letters of the names, it spells out CPA. It's very clever. That's a CPA's attempt at humor.
Keep trying.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
There's a couple in the audience.
Our attorney laughed, so hey.
We'll consider
We issued an RFP for auditing services. We like to revisit that about every 5 years or so. And so we issued an RFP. We received 4 responses. Our RFP review committee had 4 individuals on it, 2 elected officials, county treasurer, John Bond, and myself. And then we had our internal auditor also on that. Our internal auditor is not reviewed in any way by our external auditors. And so we felt he was a good addition to that. And then we also invited a CPA from the community who also sits on our audit committee. And he sat on this RFP review committee. We reviewed the 4 responses, basically with 3 criteria: project plan and timeframe, technical expertise of the firm, as well as the specific staff who would be on the project, and then references and specific local government experience. And then lastly was cost, although we reviewed the other 3 without knowing anything about the costs. That's done after the fact. Christensen, Palmer, and Ambrose, our current auditor, also came in and scored the best of all of the respondents, and so we have the RFP review committee selected them as our external auditor. This is a 5-year contract with 1-year renewable options, so we could terminate this after 1 year if we desired to, for no cause. That's not a problem there. Also, what we did a little bit differently is we also included the Weber Housing Authority in the pricing of this, and this resulted in some savings to the Weber Housing Authority of $3,000 a year for their audit fees. We felt it just made sense to have the same audit firm audit them, Dispatch, and Weber County itself. So that's the contract you have before you. The fees are laid out. They will increase by $100 a year, every other year. So we've got a pretty good pricing in terms of that, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Commissioners, questions?
I don't really have a question, but I do want to say thank you for your creativity, including those guys. Every dollar counts. So that's wise for you to do that. Thanks, Ricky.
Well, if there's any profession that's creative, known for being creative, it's always accountants, right?
Even with their jokes. Go.
So I just want to let everyone know, it's interesting that we have an internal auditor that the county employs that audits the elected official offices and also our actual departments. We have an audit committee, and on that committee we actually have outside representation also, so it's just not us looking at ourselves. And now we have this external auditor that we've had for a period of time. So there's a tremendous amount of interior and exterior, or internal and outside review of all of our practice procedures and our financials, which I think is extremely important. I also think it's extremely important to change that external auditor every 3 to 5 years. We've had several different boards I've been on that has had the same external auditor for 10 years. And when we actually have to go through a whole process, maybe a change of director, we always seemingly find problems. And so I think it's very wise from Ricky Hatch's office to really put out an RFP to change that external auditor every 3 to 5 years, just to make sure we're getting fresh eyes on our financials. So I commend you on that.
Thanks.
Commissioners, with all those wonderful accolades, can we, one, dispense of any more jokes, but have a motion to approve?
So second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye, that carries. Thank you. Thanks again, Ricky. Mr. Park, you're up next. It's a request for approval of a resolution of the County Commissioners, Weber County, approving the 2019 Weber County budget.
Morning, Commissioners.
Mr. Park, feel free to ad-lib however you'd like to.
I am not as creative in my jokes as Mr. Hatch, so I will leave the comedy over there. So, as you're well aware, the budget process started back in actually September with departments submitting their requests. Those were evaluated in the first week of October by the commissioners. We worked hard to put together a tentative budget, which we presented to the public a couple of weeks ago in a public hearing. And since that time, we've just been waiting to see if we have received any public feedback or input on the budget process. And also we kind of go through and do another double check with everything and update some of our final numbers for payroll changes and things like that, staff turnover. And so what we've done is we compiled those changes into the final budget, and I'll just highlight on some of these changes. So we've updated the payroll numbers just for anybody who had left and been rehired. We changed those wages in the budget. So if someone was making $20 an hour and they left, and now the new person's only making $18 an hour, we're only budgeting for $18 an hour. We've gone through and made some administrative changes. We have moved the gun range from the sheriff's office in the general fund to the Culture, Parks, and Recreation Department. We have moved the garage from the general fund and created it as its own separate business type fund. So now it will basically live off of the revenues that it generates. It won't require an appropriation from the general fund taxpayers. And then we've made a couple of other minor tweaks. So we've appropriated $50,000 to the YCC out of our restricted housing funds, and that will go towards them. So that's not coming from general fund money. That's restricted money that's designated for housing. We have an update to the Western Weber Master Plan for $50,000. We had an issue with our grader at the roads department that went out, and so we've budgeted $27,000 to lease a new grader. We have put in $10,000 additional into our public defenders. That's to cover some increased contract pricing. And then we've put $10,500 back into our human resources department to fully fund a supervisor training program. So unless there's any other specific questions, I would ask that you approve the final budget for the year.
Scott, I'd like to hear your very open or candid remarks regarding this year's budget. Personal.
It was a refreshing change. We've had some tough times in prior years just because money's been very tight, and there was a lot of things that we needed to do that we hadn't been able to do. I know the tax increase was unpopular several years ago, but what that has actually allowed the county to do is to be forward-thinking instead of reactive. And so instead of waiting for something to break and then paying high repair costs because we didn't have any money to invest in preventative maintenance, now we actually have a capital projects plan that's allowing us to plan for the future and will allow us to actually save the county save money in the long run. We've made, I shouldn't say we, commissioners have made changes to our other post-employment benefits, our payroll practices and policies that will help make us competitive going forward and get rid of some of these big liabilities that we've had in the past. So I'm very pleased with how the budget has turned out this year, and I hope that we can continue making these forward-thinking decisions in the future.
Terrific, thank you. Commissioners' comments regarding the budget?
Yes, I'd like to.
Please.
You know, Scott, I want you to know, so it was a pleasure working with you this year. You were a typical accountant, very matter of fact and to the point. But I like that. I like that a lot. When we sit in the room and you talk about moving money from this pot to that pot and being creative, and you offered us suggestions that allowed us to be creative in our thinking. And I was very pleased with the budget that we put out this year. It wasn't everything for everybody. We had a few people that were disappointed, but it was a good budget. We solved, well, there's 4 or 5 issues that we had, and we solved all of them but one. And we still got one to work on next year. But, gee, when you got 5 and you can knock 4 of them down, that's a good year, if you ask me. So with that, I want to thank you. I enjoyed working with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Ebert, any comments?
This was a unique, I think, budget year. I believe with having Commissioner Harvey and Commissioner Jenkins in the room, there was a different attitude about how the budget was going to move forward, and it was more of a problem solving, addressing specific issues and finding resolution of those issues. We probably haven't talked enough about several of our budgetary line items that are on your property tax that were basically not operating financially where they should. The tax rate wasn't where it was, and they were operating at a deficit, and we were constantly spending down fund balance or using general fund to pay for those specific services. And in that process, we fixed that and came up with an out-of-the-box, I think, thinking that we never thought of before, because we had more of a team approach to resolve specific issues. And that environment, that wasn't an environment of my way or the highway, one individual making all the decisions. It was more collaborative, and one idea sparked another idea that sparked another idea, and at the end of the day, I feel like we actually had a budget that resolved issues at the end of the budget session. I found that to be very refreshing and makes me, as I go out of office, feel very comfortable in the direction the county is going financially, based upon many of your recommendations and Ricky's recommendations, and now a more problem-solving approach to the budget issues. So it was the only budget I think that I've had in the last 4 years where I felt like at the end of the day when we left the room, we were in a much better position so that next year we can address that one issue instead of the 6 issues or 7 issues that we've had in the past. So I would give compliment to Commissioner Harvey and Commissioner Jenkins that this new approach, I think, has put the employees in a much better position and the county financially in a much more solvent position moving forward. So I just give my kudos to them for the manner in which the budget was held this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I call for a motion, I want to tell you that it was our goal this year is to do some type of a tax refund or a lowering of taxes. However, there were several funds that were unsustainable. Many of those have been stated are now corrected, which you've said will save us money in the future. That's positive. We very much support law enforcement. We want them to focus on public safety. However, we're blessed in this county to have many public facilities. Unlike many of the other counties, the other 29, we have a fantastic ice sheet and a conference center, the Ogden Eccles Conference Center, a Peary's Egyptian Theater. We have great parks. We have our Golden Spike Event Center. We've got all kinds of, plus other facilities that we run. We invite the public to those facilities all the time. We have another facility that we invite the public to all the time, a shooting range. It's out there on Rulin White Boulevard. It makes sense to have that public facility put under the umbrella of the Culture Parks and Recreation that manages the other public facilities. I believe with its leadership and the work that's been done there at the shooting range, we'll continue to progress out there. It'll be better for everyone. I'm really happy with what you've done in the garage and the roads. This was something that's been kind of swept under, but we've made some positive strides there. And working with Director Hadley, he's done a fantastic job out there. I commend you for not just the work, not just the direction, but the attitudes and the morale that's been improved out there, Joe. Wonderful job. Those are just to name a few, whether it's in the clerk auditor's office, whether it's in the treasurer's office, the auditor's office, in whether it's with surveying or recording or the attorneys. All of them have done just a wonderful job, and we continue that through with our community services and also our human resources. We're in a great, great spot. Of the 25 years of my county experiences, I have more optimism today than I've had ever before, and it's this whole collaborative team working together that's made it that way. So, as chair of this body, thank you for doing above and beyond work. I appreciate you, all of you. So we look forward to that combined with our economic development. We're in a great spot. So with that, commissioners, I'll entertain a motion to whatever your pleasure is on this budget.
I'd make a motion that we approve the budget for 2019 as presented.
Resolution 62
Second.
or 70?
We'll get to 70. Oh, maybe we won't this year.
It's closer than the other.
Resolution 62.
Second.
Motion and a second. Fatima?
Commissioner Ebert?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
Chair Harvey?
Aye. Thank you. We have an approved budget. Wonderful. Item number 7, Mr. Crockett, is a request for an approval of an amendment to the Tourism and Convention Event Sales and Marketing Management Agreement by and between Weber County and the Ogden-Weber Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Thank you.
Crockett.
Thank you, Commissioner. As part of that agreement with the Visitors Bureau, the county allocates funding to help the Visitors Bureau implement their marketing plan. Last week, you heard from Sarah Tolliver, who presented her 2019 marketing plan, which the county approved and accepted. That was a prerequisite to receiving additional funding in the future. And so by requirement of the contract, an amendment has to be made to that contract for each funding year. And so this is the presentation of that amendment. Sarah Tolliver is at training this week, and so she asked if I could help present this.
Very good. Commissioners, any comments or questions regarding this?
Comment would be these basically are dollars that come out of our transit room tax. Right. So with that, I'd make a motion to approve this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this agreement. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 8, Mr. Franson. A request for approval of the first reading of an ordinance amending Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, or SWIP, fees in Section 16-2-6 of the Weber County Code of Ordinances.
Thank you. Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. Welcome.
It's been exciting for me to be able to work with this program both at the county and the state level over the last 3 or 4 years. As we enacted these fees here this last year, it has allowed us as a department or division to bring in 2 consulting teams to do these inspections for us. We've asked them each to try to get 2 inspections out of an hour of service to us. With the help of our IT department, they have given us several programs where we can block together a bunch of inspections together, so we're being able right now to keep our inspections at about $50 an inspection, which is an excellent rate. We are concerned, though, that the fees that we have now would give us about 6 months of inspections, or excuse me, 3 inspections over 6 months for our county SWIP and roughly 8 inspections for the SWIPs that follow the state format or under state permit. With most of our, or many of our homes being built over a year's time, that puts us at risk of not being able to complete all of the inspections that are needed to close out the state and county permits that we have. So we're asking for the ability to amend the fee ordinance that we have so that we can charge an additional $50 per inspection after we exhaust the funds that have been deposited. I'll take any questions.
Can you give me a little detail on these inspections and what you're inspecting for storm drain?
Yes, I can. It's not for storm drain. It's for storm construction, stormwater pollution.
Pollution, okay.
Yes.
But still storm water.
Yes, it's stormwater.
Okay.
Now, when a construction site basically clears the ground, that exposes a surface to, first of all, erosion, and then if any erosion leaves the site, going into the street, either going into a body of water that is a state body of water or into a storm drain, that is both a state, federal, and county violation to the Clean Water Act. So we're required by what we call an MS4 permit from the state of Utah to inspect the construction sites, first those that are over 1 acre, all construction sites over 1 acre. And the permittee has to inspect it every week or every other week, and as the oversight agent, we have to check those inspections going out once a month to make certain that the contractors are doing what they are obligated to do under the Clean Water Act, or UPDES, Utah Pollution Elimination System program that is in effect, which follows the state, or excuse me, the federal, NPDES program.
Okay, so under normal circumstances, unless it was an extremely large house, an extremely large lot, residents wouldn't be included in this.
There are 2 functions to the UPDES program. One is the construction general permit that requires every construction site over 1 acre to be permitted through the state, and there is a second law, which is the Common Plan of Development, which refers specifically to a single-family residence, and they have an abbreviated SWIP document that they have to file with the state, and there is an exclusion if the property was established before 1992. I've got to check that date. Then they can be excluded from that. There are also exclusions if they're in a very desert-like area where we're not seeing pollution occurring from the construction sites. And there's a third relief that we're working with many of our properties up in the Upper Valley area, that they can amend their SWIP to provide for frozen ground during the wintertime, which would basically preclude them having to do their weekly inspections and would give us some relief in our oversight inspections. Our biggest concern during the wintertime, even though the ground is covered with snow in the Upper Valley, construction still goes on, and they have to go in and out from the street into where the home is. Now, one of the best management practices, or BMPs, is there to make some type of covering, or some type of entry improvement to keep dirt and mud from being tracked out onto the roadway, which goes well beyond the UPDES program, but is also a county nuisance for having dirt tracked out on the roadway and creating mess.
Thank you.
Please.
So in the resolution, it says that we already adopted some of these fees, but these are additional fees beyond the inspections that were in the initial
Yes.
cost.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and these are state required inspections that we have to do?
Yes,
So
they
if
are.
we do not pass this, basically what happens is the county out of general fund just subsidizes
Yes.
the additional inspections? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
Are we asking contractors or developers for additional inspections beyond what the state requires, or are these all the state required inspections?
No, we're not asking for anything more than what the state requires.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
That's all he has. Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Thanks. I was just going to call for that. Do we have a second? First reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we
First
have-
reading. Oh, okay.
So do we approve the first reading? So we have a motion and a second. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, James, for keeping me straight there. Number 9 is we're going to hear this from Mr. Crockett today, Commissioners. It's a request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Thomas Reuters, Westlaw, for legal research access for indigent defense attorneys.
Thank you. Commissioners, as you're aware, the county has constitutional and statutory obligations to provide legal services for indigent defendants, those who cannot afford an attorney. The county contracts with several attorneys in the area to provide representation to those individuals. And as part of their job, they have to conduct a lot of legal research, and Thomson Reuters Westlaw is the program that they've been using. It's the same program the county attorney's office uses, our investigators use, and this is a request for a renewal to the contract that they have.
So we're having some question up here. It says, we thought that we'd already approved this.
That, the one that you did before was for our investigators to use Westlaw, including their CLEAR program. This one is for the defense attorneys that we have contracts with.
Okay, great.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Crockett. Mr. Hadley, we have a request for approval of an interlocal agreement by and between Weber County and Marriott Slaterville City for road maintenance and snow removal.
Thank you, Commissioners, for the kind words you said earlier. It really means a lot to have your support. This is a 5-year contract by and between Weber County and Marriott Slaterville for our snow removal and our road maintenance. It's not a contract saying that we will do the work. It's just a contract outlining our labor and cost, what we charge them.
Very good. Commissioners, any question for Mr. Hadley?
So I assume the reason we're doing this is because we will end up charging them.
Oh, yes, we charge them. Yes. Last year, we're going to estimate at $25,000.
Yeah. Okay. I have no problem.
If this is a 5-year contract, do we have any inflation or CPI built into this?
No, I did not put any inflation in it.
Commissioners, any other questions? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second it. My only concern is if the county over the course of the next 3 to 5 years has additional staff costs or benefit costs, we see a huge jump in medical benefits. We're not passing those costs on to the users of the services. So,
That is a great point.
Maybe
we could go to a 3-year contract.
There are and there are also, you could do the term, shorten the term, but there's also provisions that allow amendments to that interlocal agreement.
Okay.
And the parties are free to make those changes as the issues come up.
Second is standing.
Second, great. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Chris.
Ms. Bybee, request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Admiral Beverage Corporation regarding beverages served at the Ogden Eccles Conference Center and Puri's Egyptian Theater. And we also have Andrew with us.
Yes.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good
We
morning.
also have a very handsome fellow in the back of the room, Mr. Danger. We welcome you here. Go ahead.
All right, well, this is actually, we went out to RFP on this, and we had two bids went through the bid process. Serving on that RFP process was myself and Andy. He's our food and beverage director there at the conference center, Jennifer and Marty, and then also Brianna with purchasing. And after reviewing, we went forth with a contract with Admiral Beverage. And so Rick Dinger with Admiral Beverage, he's here today as well. And Kevin Johnson is representing, that's the other gentleman in the back, with Admiral Beverage. So this is a 5-year contract for the juice and, sodas and waters and things served at the conference center and also here at the Egyptian Theater.
This makes it an exclusive contract.
Correct. Exclusive contract.
Great. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Bybee?
I would just like to say, we have a lot of community businesses in our community that support the community. And I look at this contract and I'm not sure how Admiral Beverage is making any money on this contract because they have committed a tremendous amount to the county as far as helping in many community events. So to me, this is just another example of a business leader, homegrown, that is here supporting our community and supporting all the things we do on a community level and is willing to actually put his money where his mouth is. So that, along with a bunch of other things that I've seen Admiral Beverage step up to the plate, I just want to say from my perspective, and I'm sure from the commissioner's perspective, thank you for supporting and helping to make this one of the best communities to live in. So if we had more businesses like Mr. Danger's business, we would continue to grow as a county and as a city. So thank you very much.
Well, we're excited about the partnership for sure.
Thank you.
Also.
Commissioners, I'll entertain. Mr. Furton, do you have any comments?
No, thank you.
Maybe we should ask Scott Park if he has any comments.
Any jokes?
No.
He now has his Mountain Dew. He promises me that I'll have a much happier life with Mountain Dew, just not a longer life.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion that we approve this contract. And in it, I want to make a comment on Andrew's nice beard and mustache.
That's called the moustache.
Well,
right.
I'm sitting here thinking how good he'd look in a bowler.
I'll second the motion and the comment.
Okay. Motion and a second. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 12, Mr. Jones. Request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Excel Construction and Development for steel awnings at the Sport Shooting Complex. Eric Jones has been our director out at the shooting range since it was constructed. He's kind of I was going to say the dad, but I'm going to call him more like the great-grandfather because you can see he's got white in his beard.
You haven't stood next to Eric for a while. He's still strong as an ox.
I know it. No, well, it has nothing to do with, he is, absolutely.
Thanks.
Hi, Eric.
Appreciate that. How you doing this morning?
Good.
Thank you.
Welcome. What do you have for us today?
This contract was put out for bid, and we received 4 companies that come and bid back on it, and it includes not only awnings, but the DCU, dust collection system out there. Both of these items are necessary out there for safety on the range to keep snow and ice out of the trenches so our volunteers and our customers don't slip and fall. And the DCU is to keep us compliant with EPA regulations in regards to Title IV of the Toxic Substance Control Act. And this DCU will bring us into that compliance.
Wonderful. Any other things you'd like to tell us about that particular shooting range, Eric?
It's been a pleasure to work with Culture Parks and Rec in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I see a lot of positive changes coming to the range, and it's going to be a positive benefit to the community and the law enforcement community as well.
Right. I did a little tongue-in-cheek before, but really I appreciate your contribution, what you've done. A lot of guys will come to work and earn a paycheck. But Eric has been so involved in this, he's encouraged hundreds of others to come and volunteer to do the same thing. You've really changed the environment in Weber County positively, Eric, and I want you to know from this body that we appreciate your work and what you've done, your contribution forever It'll affect the lives of the grandchildren of your grandchildren because of what you've done positively. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We held another class last night, and then Todd, Jennifer, and Marty attended that class for new RSOs at the range, so they can kind of get their feet wet on what we do out there and meet some of the volunteers that can be out there. It was a good turnout last night. And as I've mentioned in previous meetings, we have 130 volunteers out there, and they donated 27,000 hours last year and slated to donate over 30,000 hours this year. So
that's a significant amount. Significant amount. Thank you, Eric. Commissioners, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion for this project.
I'll make the motion that we approve this.
Second.
Great motion and a second. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for your service, Eric.
Ms. Wilbanks, Mr. Cooper. It's a request for approval of an interlocal agreement by and between Weber County and the Ogden City Redevelopment Agency to provide tax increment for the Continental Community Reinvestment Project area.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having us. I want to say first and foremost, this is a great example of how Ogden City Economic Development and Weber County Economic Development have been working so closely together over the past few months, even close to a year now. And it's been a great communication process. From an economic development standpoint, we know that capital and population are what build our areas, and we need to make sure that we maximize on those areas in our downtown urban cores. This is a perfect example of that, and we have, as you said, Brandon Cooper here. He's the Deputy Director of Economic and Community Development for Ogden City, and he's going to go through a slide that explains this approximately 52-acre area that we're talking about specifically today. It does comprise commercial reinvestment, residential reinvestment, additional parking, and really brings and breathes life back into the urban core of Ogden City. So I'm excited to have him here to walk through this. We'll both be here for any questions you have from the county side or the city side.
Thank you.
Commissioners, thank you for your time. Thanks for allowing me to join you. We've done this a few times before, so it's always exciting to share our thoughts and plans. It's been wonderful working with you on this one in particular and your staff over the last few weeks. So today's presentation, if you'll allow me a few minutes to go over a few slides, will give you the why and the what and the how.
Thank you. We're looking forward to it.
Great. So we base everything that we are doing in our Office of Economic Development in the idea that we're trying to change the neighborhoods in the downtown and the East Central area specifically into neighborhoods of choice. And so in 2015, the city and the council adopted a joint resolution initiating the Quality Neighborhood Program, and from that we really distill all of our objectives and our parameters in terms of the things that we'd like to accomplish. Here's just a few of the components that make up a quality neighborhood in our minds, and so this is the box that we put around the ideas that we're discussing in terms of new development or redevelopment. Redevelopment areas and the RDA law in general is a powerful tool to bring about this work and to bring about change in the community. We're grateful that other stakeholders in the community like yourselves and the school district also see the benefit in using the redevelopment law to bring about change. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have in our toolbox. Currently we operate 17 RDAs, that's a general term. Over the years, the law has changed, and therefore the description of those areas has changed. So we manage RDAs, redevelopment areas. We manage EDAs, economic development areas. We also manage URAs, urban renewal areas, and now CRAs, community reinvestment areas. So there's 17 currently on the books, and the older ones are generally RDAs, and they have a varied sunset schedule in terms of when those actually come off the books. Just to refresh your memories, a CRA is a new term. It's been on the books for a few years now. There are two versions of a community reinvestment area, one without eminent domain and a finding of blight, and one with eminent domain and a finding of blight. For the record, the Continental Community Reinvestment Area is a an area that we're proposing without eminent domain and without a finding of blight. So the process is streamlined, and the budget is set through interlocal agreement between the agency and the participating taxing entities. This is just a slide that shows that we have a public outreach process before we engage in these ideas of creating community reinvestment areas. We have an internal process that's policy in our office. So we hold a couple of open houses. We get public feedback from the area that we're thinking of impacting. We get ideas about what are impediments, what are bright spots, what are general comments from those people that live and work in those areas. And from that, we formulate a geographical boundary. In this case, this is the survey area. The proposed survey area is essentially from 27th to the backside of 25th Street, from Wall to Washington Boulevard. You'll notice that we've carved out the Weber Behavioral Health Center and also part of the civic block where the municipal building and the amphitheater is. But we have included some parts of the civic block as well as the remaining parts of the area, most specifically the old Hostess plant. From that area, we derive a base valuation. So the $19,458,665,000 valuation is the 2018 valuation of all the parcels within that boundary that I just showed you. We anticipate that if all the projects that we are looking at accomplishing with various partners actually takes place, then there would be a $236 million investment in that geographical area, adding a taxable valuation to those parcels of $162 million. So what we're proposing to actually undertake that $236 million investment is a 22-year project area that would generate $35 million in tax increment. And that $35 million is created through the participation of the three entities that you see there at a 90% participation level. That would be a little over $7 million for the city, a little over $7 million for the county, and $20 million for the school district. So what that boils down to is a $35 million budget, as it's stated in the project area plan, as well as the interlocal agreement. $26 million available for actual investment into redevelopment activities. That could be incentives to developers, that could be public infrastructure, those kind of things. $7 million that would be specifically carved out for our housing initiatives, and that $7 million could be used anywhere in the city, not just in this geographical area that we're proposing. And then about $2 million for admin costs over those 22 years. So that summarizes the content of the interlocal agreement, and our recommendation is the approval of the interlocal agreement. Questions?
Very good. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Wilbanks or for Mr. Cooper regarding this proposal?
I have a comment.
Please.
You know, it's interesting. When I was in the legislature, we always had the debate going about RDAs and CDAs and whether you should use this tax increment financing because you freeze it and you take increment away from schools, and they're the biggest participant in this. Well, by far the biggest. I mean, half of everything in there is theirs. But Ogden School District's been a champion here to do this and allow the city to redevelop. And by doing so, they allow you to be a little more creative in your use and what you can do. And I know the Taxpayers Association was down on this at one time, but as they look at these now, without this increment financing, you can't redevelop a city the way you guys are trying to do, and it's just necessary to do. And when you look at the future of Ogden, truly, if you want this city to rebound from the ages of being a railroad town, you've got to be able to be a little progressive thinking and allow something like this to happen. And so I've always been supportive of these, and you can see by the numbers that were presented to us we're getting very little tax off this anyway. So I'm very supportive of it. I speak in favor of it.
I appreciate that. Ogden City appreciates the willingness of the county and the school district in participating in these redevelopment areas. RDA law is not a universally applicable thing.
Yeah.
And I think the Taxpayers Association and the legislature recognizes that it's universally available to all cities and agencies in the state, but it's applied differently, and sometimes the application of RDA law is unnecessary or doesn't generate or produce the required outcomes. In Ogden City specifically, the outcomes that we're projecting wouldn't happen otherwise. The Trackline Economic Development Area is a great example. The BDO, or the DDO, EDA, are two great examples of economic development that likely would not occur in the same manner over the same period of time without public subsidy. And so we're a unique community in that way, as you've recognized. Other communities across the state don't have the same challenges we do, and therefore would need to apply RDA laws differently. We feel that we have made some really good changes over the last 10 years of how we use the law, what we're doing with it, and we're seeing great outcomes. And so recognizing that is very, very keen. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting, Brandon, as you jump into this, some of these projects are so long, as this one is 22 years, that by the time you start into them, and you never see the end of them because you're gone and retired, and you know, they're just you're way out there. So you have to have a little bit of a ability to look into the future.
As they did 19 years ago with the Business Depot Ogden.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a great example.
And to couple that, commissioners, the agreement is for 22 years or for full build out, so whichever one comes first to when it reaches the numbers that were projected within the interlocal agreement, which you should have in your packets.
Please, James.
So I'm appreciative that Ogden City came to us with a plan and with developers already lined up. So this isn't a chicken or an egg. This is the chicken. And we know what we're getting. We're getting the chicken. I also like that we have been concerned in the past because when we give 100% CRA, RDA, that doesn't allow the county to recoup some of those additional services as we move forward as a county that we have to provide. And Ogden City was very amenable to go back to the developers and say, okay, we need to adjust this, what can we do? And came back to us again with a change in their plan that met what our concerns were, but still allowed the developer to be able to move forward with the project. So I want to say thank you to Ogden for being, for understanding what the issues we may have, and then for bringing us an actual plan. And they showed us what it will look like. They showed us that it was intentional, that there was an ongoing community and economic development purpose to what they were doing. And it was to revitalize their urban core and to bring a population to Ogden City that will eventually support more commercial and retail downtown and really revitalize the internal core of the entire county. So very thoughtful. We've seen other CRAs that maybe aren't as thoughtful at times. It's just an attempt to get something going. I think Ogden City was actually kind of focused on what they were trying to bring, and then they created that plan. So this makes this much easier. The other thing I really like, and you don't see the full schedule, but the schedule kind of puts some of the building off for a couple years, which puts us back into our 20-year usual timeline that we like. So we have initial build out at the very beginning for the first couple of years, hopefully, and then into the third, fourth, and fifth year we have some more build out, but then that gets us back into our 20-year kind of our timeline. But hopefully what will happen is we'll get it built out, it'll build out quickly, and we won't go the full 22 years. We'll hit the number before we hit the timeline. So,
right, with the max that Holland mentioned, that's a critical component, so that could happen sooner than we anticipate. And right now we're looking at the biggest project to happen the soonest. So of that $262 million investment over the period, we hope 115 of that happens within the next couple of years. So that'll really boost that early period.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, this particular item would be a resolution. For us, would have, is that known? Would have our legal prepare
Yes, and I believe one has been sent to you just in the last couple minutes.
But it's basically, I would imagine is pretty much, will you give us just a moment to take a look at that? Sure enough, from Mr. Erickson. Cortland, you're amazing.
You get jazz hands for that.
Send her an email, thank you. It would be a number closer to 70 than the original one that you thought. Yes. The only thing is on this resolution, do we need to describe anything as it relates to the 90%, or just, Mr. Crockett, that's to you?
No, I think the statute in, I think it's 1113-202.5 requires that if a county is going to be sharing its taxes, an interlocal agreement is required to be approved by resolution. So the resolution will reference the interlocal agreement. So you're passing the interlocal. It's just an added formality that the law requires.
It's in the second whereas clause, the interlocal reference.
That looks great, and we understand. Thank you, Mr. Crockett. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion for Resolution 63.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 63.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for Resolution 63. Fatima?
Commissioner Ebert?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Nice doing business with you.
Thank you.
Great.
See you again, yeah.
You know, item number I is comments from the commission and also the Stall of Fame. I'm going to ask that Commissioner Ebert say a couple of things, but before that, regarding our Stall of Fame, Commissioner, this is a surprise to you, Commissioner Jenkins, but we have a parking stall for people who do outstanding things, and that's most of us in the county. But would you talk just briefly about Brandon Miles? You said the other day how impressed you were with him, one of 16 in the country.
Well, I was. If there was an article in the paper that talked about how Weber County prosecutor received national recognition for his work during a Project Safe Neighborhood National Conference on Thursday in Kansas City, and it was Brandon Miles, and he was one of 16 given this in the nation. And I was just so impressed that I told Shelley to pass this around because I was just so impressed that we would have a local boy have that kind of recognition. It speaks to the fact that we're doing good things locally in the county, and that we've got good people who care about our county. You know, this is all above and beyond, and it just makes me happy and proud to see this happen. So yeah.
So that parking stall for the next little while goes to Brandon Miles.
If I could just add, I think that's absolutely fantastic. He is a phenomenal attorney, and also that award ceremony. I can't remember if you mentioned it was attended by the President of the United States.
Was it? Oh, I didn't know. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. All right. Well, Commissioner, next week I think you're going to be unavailable, and the week after that's Christmas, and the week after that's New Year's Day. So what does this mean?
Well, I was hoping it meant.
How about the mic?
I was hoping it meant that you hadn't done your math or your agenda on it. That's what I was hoping it meant.
Well, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
So I'm not a big farewell guy, right? You just do your job and move on. That's kind of how I am. So I haven't prepared anything, but I will just say briefly, it's been a pleasure, an immense pleasure. And I wanted just to reference a book that's just an amazing book that I would suggest everybody reads, because really attitude is about individual preference. You know, it's if you're going to be a happy person, you decide to be a happy person. If you're going to be a motivated person, you choose to be a motivated person. At the end of the day, when we have internal drives, motivations, you're always much happier than external. and I firmly believe this, but there's an amazing book called The Fred Factor, and it's a pretty short read, and I would suggest you read it. It's called The Fred Factor. And it tells the story about an individual who had moved in to a home, and he had this mailman who came up the day he was moving in and said, I noticed you're moving in, got all his information, worked out a schedule, because this gentleman was a salesman and traveled a lot, and just went above and beyond every time he turned around. And this mail delivery person was extremely happy in life. And it taught the author of this book some amazing lessons. And he came up with 4 principles, which I believe in. And the first is that everyone makes a difference. There's no unimportant jobs. There's no unimportant people. And that affects not only how you treat people, but how people feel in their lives. And you can motivate people more by letting them know that you see value in what they do than you can do in virtually in anything else. You can tell people stuff all the time, but if they don't feel it, I mean, we all have those people in our life that say things where like, yeah, that's nice, but you don't believe it, right? And so there are really no unimportant jobs or unimportant people. Number 2, success is built on relationships. I don't think people realize that at the end of the day. You know, my old chief used to say, I'm not the best cop, I'm not the smartest person, but people will forgive an awful lot if they like you. And that stuck with me. That building relationships can be one of the most important things. I had another sergeant who used to tell me, and I hope this is okay, feel free to bleep this, but he says, you don't step on anyone's toes because you never know what toes you step on may be connected to the rear end that you may kiss one day. I've always thought about that. You just never know where you'll end up in a year or 2. But there were 7 B's that the author came up with. Be real, be interested in what people are saying, be a better listener. And we have too many people who are formulating their next argument instead of listening to what you're trying to say. Be empathetic, be honest, be helpful, and Jim Harvey's favorite is be prompt. People's time is valuable to them, no matter who they are. Their time is valuable to them. And that's how you build and strengthen relationships. The 3rd principle, that you must continually create value for others. You know, so often in our life we try to create value for ourselves. But when you try to create value for others, that is one of those actions that people actually feel when you're creating value. I had an amazing person that I have a lot of respect for, probably doesn't understand this or realize I shouldn't understand this, but it's Cortland Erickson. One day Cortland Erickson was walking down the hallway and he looked a little fired up. So I pulled him aside, I said, what's up? He says, well, I'm glad you asked me. And then he talked to me about a decision we were getting to make. And he said, do you realize how that affects, and he said, this group of people? And I said, well, let's talk about it. So we talked about it for a while and he was right. And so we made a significant, I feel, change in a decision we were about to make that had, I think, a tremendous effect on people. And I felt like that I met that goal with him, was that I created value within an issue that he had that I just was not seeing. And then reinvest in yourself regularly. We had a great meeting the other day with our 911 district, with our ABC board, is that ACB board? I can't remember what board it's called. And one of the goals that we had set for the director was that the director continually goes to training to reinvest in her, because she is so worried about taking care of everybody else, she's not reinvesting in herself. Commissioner Harvey taught me the value of this. The first thing when he came into office, he says, well, we've got some people that I want to invest a little bit into. And he took them to this amazing training to help them rediscover who they really were and discover the tools they needed to be successful in their lives. And so I've tried to live by these principles. I've tried to apply these principles to different things in my life. But for this job, my number 1 goal was to leave the county in a better position than the day that I started. And I feel with the tremendous team that we've had, I feel with the new set of commissioners, we did a tremendous amount of work in the first couple of years, but it was more the mechanics of where we were in the county. And I think the things we've done the last couple of years, and especially in the last 7 months, have been more to make the county more solvent and be on the right principled track. And I feel very comfortable moving forward that has been accomplished. If you feel that it hasn't, you've got a yes vote for another 3 weeks. Make sure you get me. That's what I keep telling these guys. But it's been my privilege. It's been 4 years of my life that I think have been very good for me to grow. It's been a tremendous amount of work. I think my golf game is worse now than the day I started golfing, because I just haven't had a chance, because we have been investing a tremendous amount of time to building and strengthening the county. But I want to tell those who have invested time in me, Ricky and John Bond and Jim Harvey and Cortland and others. Scott Park has taught me a tremendous amount. I've learned a tremendous amount about being kind and thoughtful from Sean Wilkinson, and so on and so on. There are so many people who have invested a little bit of time in me here and there to help me better understand what my roles and responsibilities are. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who have spent some time and made me a better person, and hopefully a better employee to somebody else moving forward. But the commission isn't mine. It's a position that the people have granted me, and I understand that. And so I'm going to pass that baton off to Gage Frohr, who I have a tremendous amount of confidence in. I've sat in a bunch of meetings with him, and I feel that with the makeup of this commission, the county will continue to move forward and is in good hands. So thank you very much. That was my idea of short comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion for a closed meeting to discuss strategy relating to imminent and ongoing litigation.
So moved.
Second.
Great. It's a roll call.
Commissioner Ebert?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
Chair Harvey?
Aye. Don't you go away now. We'll be right back.